So, Rebecca, let's answer some emails. What do you say?
Yeah.
This first email.
Are they all about trauma?
Some of them.
Okay.
But this first one is a more recent email. Anonymous from Salt Lake City. Anonymous from Salt Lake City. She says, "Hi, Kirk and Rebecca. I've been seeing a current therapist for about a year, and I think he is great. We have been using internal family systems to get through my traumas and grief, and it has helped me immensely. The only issue is that sometimes I find myself thinking that I can't talk to him about certain things because I'm afraid he will judge me. He is Mormon, and they have very strict ideals in the Mormon religion. I am a gay woman, and while he knows this about me, it almost never comes up because I'm not dating right now. My worry is that I don't think issues around sex will be something I will want to discuss in therapy eventually. Thinking about talking to him about this makes me cringe. Would it be appropriate to see another therapist for this behind his back? Is it a bad sign that I can't see myself discussing this with him? For more context, when I think about discussing this with him, I feel embarrassed, scared, and on guard. Thank you so much for all the work that you put in the podcast. Take care of yourself." Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, I would check in with the therapist. I think the therapist already knows that she's a gay woman. That must have come up somewhere.
Yeah, she said, he knows this about me is what she said.
And I would want to check in and say, eventually I'm going to start dating, or even if I'm not dating, there's a huge part of my life that I'm not talking about. I'm wondering if they feel this level of shame anywhere else, if our anonymous patron feels that shame. And this would be transference, that she's projecting this onto the therapist. I mean, not that she is not rightly nervous. If you live in Salt Lake City and you are dealing with the Mormon community, usually you're coming across homophobia. So, there's some is this implicit bias? Confirmation bias?
Implicit bias from her that he is going to be against her?
This is confirmation bias, that she's assuming. Oh, I'm getting this. I think
it's just bias. It's just straight up bias. Yeah.
Okay. But it's good to check in. I mean, it's always a red flag if you're keeping a big thing. I remember I was working with a client for 3 years before she felt safe enough to disclose sexual abuse from a teacher to me. So clients do this all the time. It's just here, there's a subject matter that would need to be checked out. You should never see a second therapist behind your first therapist back. That's called splitting. But also I understand there's some regional aspects to this. In Utah, it's probably harder to find a non-Mormon therapist. So those are my thoughts.
Do you think she would be generally safe to talk about those things with him?
I don't know, because I don't know if he's trained. Some people are trained as a Christian therapist or more. I don't know. I don't know if they're trained as a Mormon therapist, and so they wouldn't feel safe discussing, or they wouldn't have the skills to talk about this in a non-judgmental way. But I would definitely want to ask. I mean, how long can she?
Kind of sounds like you're thinking that there's a good chance that he will be a good therapist for her in this way.
I mean, I would hope so.
Yeah, me too.
But I don't know. I would need to see this guy's website and kind of suss out. Yeah,
that's actually a good point. Obviously, it'd be encouraging if he had something on his website indicating that.
So, right, I have LGBTQIA plus friendly or something on my website. That's a code to say you can talk about this with me.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. It's also possible that he isn't safe to talk to, or that he's half safe and half not safe. I've talked with religious therapists who are totally safe, and I've talked with religious therapists who will say that they're safe and they're friendly, but they're not really when you actually get into it with them. Whether or not that would play out with a client or not, depending on the content of the therapy session, is in question.
Yeah, often people say I'm safe and I'm friendly, but they really know nothing about how those communities work.
Yeah.
And are constantly in shock. This happened to me with a really dear friend of mine who's straight, lots and lots of exposure to gay culture, but she was seeing this lesbian client with a personality disorder and did not understand the dynamics of what was happening.
Like what? What was happening?
Just this client was having affairs and all kinds of things. And I was like, oh, yes, this is familiar in the queer community. Let me kind of lay out the dynamics that are happening within the couple. And my friend was like, whoa, I had no idea. Yeah, there's some specific differences. So it sounds like you and this therapist have some things to talk about, but mostly you're feeling tons and tons of anxiety and shame that you're not talking about with your therapist. And that's as important as anything else.
Yeah, there's a number of scenarios if you brought this up with your therapist. One is that it's your worst nightmare and he is subtly nefarious with you. Another possibility is that he is one of those Mormons that is actually quite progressive and might even be gay himself, who knows? Or 5 of his 6 best friends are gay or something, or whatever. Or he's somewhere in the middle, which is a pretty big range, where he is on paper a good therapist for lesbian clients, as proven by a dozen or so lesbian clients he's already worked with. Or he is one of those Mormon or religious therapists that consciously thinks that they're safe and good with this sort of thing, but they secretly hold, or not secretly to their clients, but quite openly in their life, they believe that you are sinning and you're going to hell and that you have been tricked by the evils of society to not be with men or something. But they don't reveal that to their clients. That, it's a pretty dangerous therapist. So it's I don't know what the percentages are, honestly. In the past, I would have assumed that it would work out, but the more I actually learn about the diversity of ideas and political views and brainwashing that Americans, particularly in communities, the further you get away from Seattle, the more I am uncertain as to how to guide people in a situation like this. You just
and Salt Lake City is getting more and more progressive. Like some of the queerest, like super queer, like can't go back in the closet people I know are like, maybe I should move to Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
I'm like,
well,
okay.
I was just there. Stacey and I were just there a couple of weeks ago, and we were passing through, and I was looking for a restaurant on Yelp, and I found this restaurant, Bartolo, or I think Bartolo's or something. I was following Google Maps to get there. I was surprised that I think that might be at least one of the gay neighborhoods because there were gay pride flags around, and I believe that our busboy was gay or queer in some way. And I thought, oh, Salt Lake City has a Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
In Seattle, Capitol Hill is at least, historically the gay neighborhood.
Yeah, and actually there was a sex therapy, one of the people in my sex therapy class was in Salt Lake, and I had a lot of questions, and she said, if you're not Mormon here, you're kinky. And I was like, oh, just so I know.
So I have some gifts for you.
What?
Many gifts.
What?
Because it's been so long, Rebecca.
It's been a long month.
So the first thing I have is
merch. Oh my God.
It's a Rebbeca-sode shirt.
It's the Rebbeca-sode t-shirt. Oh my God.
Stacey designed it.
Oh, Stacey.
It's so great, right?
It's so great.
And there's a mug as well.
Oh my God.
A Rebbeca-sode mug.
I need like 30 of these for the holiday season.
Okay.
Are you ready? Oh my God.
So if you want your Rebbeca-sode merch, you can get it. Where do I send people? There's links on our website, I believe.
I have a movie party for my birthday. I don't know how many people are going to show up, but last year, there was 10 people there, and my fantasy is to get Rebbeca-sode t-shirts for everybody and take a group photo.
Yeah.
I have my own merch, everyone.
You do. And I have a bunch of stuff that was sent during the 16th anniversary show.
That was crazy. You guys made 16 hours of content.
So this first thing is from patron Junie, who has her own YouTube channel in which she makes journals.
Is that...
And so that she made one for you.
That's so sweet. I've seen her stuff.
Yeah. So
This is so sweet.
It's handmade,
oh, wow.
crafted.
It's heavy on the ephemera, everyone who knows me. Wow,
And
this is beautiful. And then like beautifully stitched on a sewing machine. Oh, and every page, I could cry. Everyone. So every page is a different type of vintage paper.
Yeah. Like found paper kind of thing.
And some of it is like hand dyed. Oh, this is really sweet.
Yeah. So that's from Junie.
Thank you, Junie.
And then this is from the person I forget the name of. But do you remember the listener who asked for our favorite colors?
Yes.
Does
that like a pom-pom garland?
Yeah. Well, is that what that is? I didn't even know what to call it.
I'm like your craft interpreter. Yes.
Oh, I didn't even know it. You immediately knew that it separates into a long. So it's a So it's like a holly or something that you would hang from somewhere.
Oh my god, this is great.
So those are the colors that you identified. It's sort of a.
It's funny because it matches my T-shirt clearly,
It does.
Unconsciously or consciously.
Yeah.
Podcast wife has been observing me. So my merch is teal. And so I said teal and green. And so my pom-pom garland, for those of you.
So is that a thing? Do people make pom-pom garlands?
So I have a holiday. I once went to Mandy Greer is an artist in the South End, and she has different workshops. She has a pom-pom garland holiday workshop that you can attend to learn how to make, first off, make your own pom-poms, which is a fabulous art form. And then it's just like this, crochet your own chain.
Yeah. Wow, you knew the whole thing.
I know the whole thing. And this is funny. This is inspiration to me because sitting in my living room is like half of the chain of what was going to be my Halloween pom-pom garland, which I'm not getting around to making. But this is inspiration to me. So I will put this up.
And then another patron,
oh my God,
who I also forgot who gave this to you, but it's all in the 16th, made this little...
Oh my goodness, I got a duck.
A little blue duck for you.
Oh.
A little stuffed animal.
It has my name on it.
Yeah.
This is so great.
Yeah.
Well, I have an altar at work, so this will definitely go up on my altar.
And then another patron, the last patron here, I forgot... Again, it's all in the 16th, but you can have this scarf, this like silky scarf. But she sent in maybe the card probably says, but she has her own sourdough starter.
Oh wow!
Yeast here for Rebecca and family. It says, and then there's a card for you.
Oh wow!
And here is a
recipe instructions.
The bread recipe.
God, I'm gonna need help.
And here is a silky scarf.
Okay. I'm going to need help with this, but I know just the person.
Here's a bag, a Nordstrom bag you can put all everything in.
Gina, I'm putting this out. You will be my bread patron. You will be my bread helper. This is a gorgeous scarf.
Yeah.
Did this come with the bread?
Yeah.
Or is this... Wow. This is gorgeous. It's very flowery.
Yeah. I thought it didn't really go with my outfit, so I thought maybe you could
so side note, I am prepping... for art activities for Dia de los Muertos on the first Day of the Dead. And it's so much about flowers there. Traditionally, it's the marigold flowers. So I'm like collecting all these marigold photos. And then I just went off the rails and just started collecting flower photos. Because I was like, it's just, flowers are joyful for me. Well, thank you, everybody. This is above and beyond my wildest dreams.
The listeners love you.
That's really, really nice. So I have some, I got a big affirmation from the universe. Do you want to hear about it?
I do.
So did you ever know Sharon Marinetti, Dr. Lepper now? She was a student. We became friends. And in 2016, she started doing her dissertation at Leslie in expressive arts therapy. She started doing her dissertation on menopause, and we started talking about it. And she developed this protocol using like 6 parts of midlife, like socioeconomic, physical, spiritual. we did a mandala about each one, and it was really inspirational for me. And that process, I think, led me to the tarot card process. But we started a conversation about women and menopause and mental health. And I've been thinking about it ever since. And I've been wanting to do a CEU on it, or wanting to take a CEU. And I kept waiting for someone else to do it. And then I went through my sex therapy program and asked them, okay, who's doing it? And they said, no one. And then that thing that happens only in my brain that says, oh, if no one's doing it, then I have to do it. Mm-hmm. So I designed this training and I led it for the first time. Mm-hmm. And we only had 3 weeks to advertise, and over 30 people showed up, which is crazy if you know anything about how stuff like that works. And I got a big enthusiastic thumbs up from Cascadia after doing it. I'm going to do it twice with them next year, and once on Zoom with CIIS out of California next year.
How do people sign up for it?
So look out for the Cascadia or the CIIS website. I don't think the dates are up yet, but you can email them and tell them that you're interested and want to be on the wait list for when it does come open. But, when I don't know if you feel like this with the podcast or any other aspects of your life. Like, I want to do this thing. Does anybody else care? Would anybody else be interested? And then it was amazing to put forth this menopause and mental health thing and have so many people say, I'm interested right now.
Well, it sounds like you're saying it's, as a leader of the course, it's therapeutic for you to be with your people.
Yeah. Well, it is. Let me tell you, it feels like it's such a radical act to talk about women's mental health and health for 6 hours. Like, that in itself, like, that's all we're going to talk about, and we're not going to be apologetic for it, and we're not going to say we have to do anything else in this conversation, because it could easily fill 6 hours. And this topic in particular is not covered anywhere else.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that, just aging past, we were talking before starting to record.
All of our aches and pains.
Yeah. And
I'm on 9 medications right now.
Wow. Yeah. I don't think it's uncommon. And the thing that I notice, my main social media scrolling is Reddit. Mm-hmm. And I subscribe to certain subreddits, like cute cat subreddits or other, or
is there a cow hoof care subreddit?
Oh, I'm sure there is.
Oh God, I need to follow it.
Because anyone can make a subreddit. There's a Psychology in Seattle subreddit.
Oh, really? Because Nate the hoof guy is my nighttime ritual. Every night.
There's probably a subreddit for Nate the hoof guy.
Oh.
So
I feel warm inside.
Yeah. And other, I subscribe to like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Seattle.
I recently typed in I'm looking at the sex therapy conference in Las Vegas in June, and I was just curious if there were any reviews. And so I typed that in to Reddit, and it was fascinating. What came up was all this stuff is sex therapy legit?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is okay.
It's not like other social media in that, generally speaking, a lot of smart people use it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, certainly there are not smart people using it and commenting, but every subreddit is different. Like if you are a wise, smart person, certain subreddits are not going to appeal to you and you just won't participate anymore. And plus, comments get upvoted and downvoted. Mm-hmm. And so the better comments end up rising to the top. And also there's a culture on Reddit that I've noticed over the 10 or 15 years that I've been using it, where there is some self-policing around things. People will get used to certain trends. Like if someone drops in a comment that is sexist, for example, there's a number of people that will comment against that person in a way that actually very effectively shuts it down without sort of getting into it with them. There's a way to get into it with them that keeps the ball rolling or encourages the trolls. And there's another way of saying it, of just like, oh, you incel or something. Like just to make a little, point it out, but don't get it. Don't start arguing with them, just sort of put them in their place and move on. Don't get bogged down. And it, will cultivate this culture and certain subreddits that I just really appreciate. And I feel like over the past few years, when I see a post and I go to the comment section, more often than not, I'm pleasantly surprised by what the top voted up comments are saying, that people are actually teaching me things, or in alignment with at least the thoughts that I have, stated better than what I would say, actually, a lot of articulate, smart people. Anyway, and there's like astronomy subreddits and therapy subreddits, psychiatry. Anyway, but I have noticed that whenever there's an issue of post 50 health, there's almost no commentary. And Reddit has commentary on everything. If you know how to search on Reddit, you can find, like when I want to figure out a tech problem, like an app isn't working or a function on my phone I can't seem to find, I don't go to the main websites, like I have a Pixel phone, which is by Google. I don't go to the Google website because it's often wrong, but Reddit is right because
it's right.
Because people will vet the comment, right? Someone will comment, like someone will ask a question and then someone provides an answer. If that one gets upvoted, a lot of people said that actually works. Whereas if you go to the Google help page, it's just some Yahoo tech person who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about half the time. And so you can find so many answers on Reddit for things, on how to fix this, how to fix that. But when it comes to post 50 health, or even maybe post 40 health, because so many young people use Reddit and not a lot of older people, or older people aren't commenting very much, or they're ashamed and they don't want to bring it up, or I don't know. But there's almost, because I'll go to Reddit just for my own health questions at times. And, obviously you shouldn't use the internet for your health, but anyone who has a chronic health problem understands that you can't just go to your doctor.
Well, right.
You have to get a community. You have to hear what people are talking about,
So a client and I were talking the other day, and she said, my memory is shot. My hair is falling out. I've put on a ton of weight around my abdomen. And my first question was, what age did your mother go into menopause? Like that. These are so clearly hormonal, but like you would never go to your doctor and say, they would rarely tie that together just due to pressure or whatever. Who knows what's going on? But there's a way in which, right, as aging people, we exchange back and forth.
Or I think one of the things that the physicians are operating from is, well, old people gain weight sometimes, and what's the big deal?
So I was telling you, I am 3 months into a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. My A1C was at 7.8, which is like solidly diabetic. And for me and my doctor, it came out of nowhere. Like it just came in, and I was like, it was the summer and it was hot, but I was so tired. Like I remember asking my friend, we were going to an event like way up north, like on Camino Island. And I just said, can you drive? Like there was just this exhaustion that like I couldn't imagine driving up there. And some other things happened. I made some really weird ass stupid mistakes. My doctor was like, I don't know, we'll just test your iron and your glucose and we'll see. And it came back like solidly diabetic. And we were both in shock of like, and it came out of nowhere. Like that was not the case. I mean, as with most people our age, like when we go to a physical, we get everything checked out. But like there we were sitting in the office talking through my symptoms, and we kind of laughed off diabetes. We both did, because it was just, it came on so fast for me. But yeah, I mean, without our friends in this process, we're totally shot because, I mean, and it's great that we are living longer as humans. I saw this presentation.
But is it? I'm not sure. I mean, I'm glad, but I don't know.
We need a whole bunch. We need a lot more people trained in gerontology.
Well, I have in the last 5 years developed this perspective that if there is a God or a universe that is thinking about the bell curve of life, that life is precious, people want to live, but I wonder if our lives are designed to give us a number of years of declining function and health, increasing pain, increasing cognitive dysfunction, to the point where at a certain point you just say, you know what, I think it's time to shuffle off this mortal coil and go on to the next phase.
Yeah. So right now I have high blood pressure, which also came out of nowhere. Like, I was no drama Obama my entire life. I was 120 over, like, they take your your blood pressure, and you're like, I have no idea what those numbers means, but they would always say to me, that number, you're fine. And then, I don't know, a year ago, I went to get my blood pressure taken, and it was 155. And the doctor was like, okay, we're going to do that again. We're going to go through a series of exercises. And it did not go down. And then it just stayed like that. And it was actually my skin doctor who said to me, like, I would like to see you next year. You need to take your medication. And I was like, oh, crap. So medicated, I'm at 130, which is not, it's fine. It's not great. But it became obvious to me, like, I will never get back to 120. Like, whatever's going on in my aging body has put me at this totally different level. If anybody writes in and tells me to take turmeric,
well, we'll know that they're joking, right? Because they understand.
No one would ever say that to me. So it's just kind of fascinating to, like, oh, my body's changing radically.
Yeah.
I was at this menopause presentation, and I'm forgetting her name, but she's Scottish, she's a doctor, and she's the author of this book called The Brand New Menopause or something. And she said this really funny thing, which is that for all time before this time, the average woman at 51 would either get syphilis or a tooth infection and die. But now we have penicillin and all these other medications, and that's not the case anymore. And so we live long past that, and we're starting to see en masse what happens to human bodies as they age. And it's, to use an old term, it's gnarly. It's not pretty.
Mm-hmm. You know what my turmeric is?
No. What are you taking?
No, I'm not taking it. My nemesis.
What is your nemesis?
Is apple cider vinegar.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Everyone's I'll from medical problems to problems with fruit flies, which actually does work, to problems with mold, to problems with my taxes, like, just everything is like apple cider vinegar, the answer to every life's problem.
Are you having a bad fruit fly season?
No, we had a bit of a problem a month ago because I think I got some fruit that came with it, some fruit flies, and Stacy put out a thing of apple cider vinegar with cellophane on top with the holes, and it eradicated. Why? Do you have a lot of?
I am having a horrible fruit fly problem, and I blame my neighbor's plum tree.
Well, apple cider vinegar, Rebecca.
Well, let me tell you,
maybe with turmeric.
The fruit flies have gotten. They're either stupider. They'll sit on the edge of the trap, but they won't actually go in. So I have 3 different traps going, and then I finally got one of those blue light electric traps, which is like a light, and then it has a sticky thing so that they fly towards the light and then they get stuck on the sticky thing.
Does that work?
It's moderately effective.
Can I ask you a question? I'm
collecting other kinds of bugs, which is fascinating. Sometimes I check just to see who's like showed up in the trap.
You're like the death knell of bugs.
I just want to, who's here?
Is it slightly windy by your traps?
No, it's in the middle of my kitchen.
But is there any kind of a breeze or anything?
No, but if I step near the traps, they all fly away.
Right. So it needs to, I found that it needs to be in a place where they aren't being disturbed. And so they land on the thing, because I've seen that where I'm looking at it, I'm like, go in the hole, go in the hole.
I'm yelling at fruit flies.
But if you're not around, if there's no movement or wind, they will eventually crawl in there. But if there is movement, it spooks them and they go running.
Yes. So this is like, some people doom scroll. I
Stare at fly traps.
Stare at fruit fly traps. So
You can also just kill them. I mean, they're pretty easy to kill.
I am embarrassed. I am down to 4. There were probably 30 at the worst.
You're down to 4 fruit flies?
Yes.
You can count the fruit flies?
I can count them. This is how close.
Have you named them?
This is how intimate I am. This is how successful I feel in the process. I mean, it was downright disgusting. Like
30, that's, yeah.
It was embarrassing. But my neighbors, I've trimmed back all of the plum trees that would fall on my property.
Oh.
But you know how close the property line is to my to my kitchen. It's like feet away are rotting plums. You're not going to win in that situation. I mean, the other reason I could be down to 4 fruit flies is that the plums are dried out enough that there's no swarms sending them in. It was so gross.
Yeah.
It was so gross that at one point I had 4 fruit fly traps going.
What if you just told your neighbor that you were going to pick them and like throw them away or eat them or something?
It's a rental on that side, and it is 4 foot deep blackberry brambles plus. So that fruit's all rotting too, plus rotting plums. It's kind of. So for people who don't live in the Pacific Northwest, stuff grows here at an exponential rate.
Yeah.
It's not like...
You know what other part of the U.S. is surprisingly like that?
What?
The Southeast. Like Florida and Georgia and Tennessee. It's flat, so you don't see it because it's, like in Seattle, there's hills you see far. But down there, the telephone poles will just be, dripping with vines and plant, like everything. It's very wet and hot and sun, and so I was surprised because I always thought that about Seattle, like the north, because you step outside any direction from the Pacific Northwest and it gets very arid and not a lot of life. Even Northern California isn't. Yeah, nothing. It doesn't have as much.
Yeah, you can cultivate stuff down there, but here it's just like. You get a 4 foot deep blackberry bush that's like awesome. Yeah. So the deadly combination in Seattle is, oh my God, that purple flower. I want to call it. It is in the deadly nightshade family, but I can't. It's morning glory, ivy, and blackberry all together.
Our morning glory is white flowers.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, we have all morning glory. It's that vining. It grows. You can watch it grow. It just sits there. Yeah. Although morning glory. It's such a weed, but it doesn't look horrible.
Right, it's pretty.
And it's easy to pull. But blackberries, I have gone to war with blackberries. I
have scars from I don't have my gardening gloves on, and I'm so frustrated. I'm going down to the car, and I think, I'll just pull this out. Wrong choice. I had one get stuck in me, and I couldn't get it out, and it was infected. They're going to kill you.
I went to war with some blackberries. Actually, the first time I went to war was in the house I lived in just a block away from where you live right now. Problem. And I would dig out the roots, but if you leave any remnant of a root, which it goes deep, then it'll come back in full force. I've used chemicals. I've used the kinds of sheeting that cuts it off from water and from sun and stuff. Nothing works. It's just a constant. The feeling you get when you're in the Pacific Northwest, as I think you also feel when you're in a place like Northern Florida or Georgia, is that we are just here to beat back life with a machete, and you cannot clean it to the extent that you won't have to deal with it ever again,
No, I have 16 my yard is so tiny, and I have 16 different blackberry starts that I am monitoring and constantly digging out. I had one pierce a blood vessel between 2 fingers as I was pulling it out, and it hematomaed, and I was it's gonna kill me.
You meaning a massive blood blister grew?
Yeah, it pierced
an internal.
Yes.
Gross.
Yeah.
You weren't wearing gloves?
No, this is the problem, is that I'm heading down to the car and I see one's gotten out of control.
You got to have gloves on
in
the porch
pocket.
or something. Or you
I
need a little
gloves
box
in the car.
You need a little Tupperware, like a waterproof Tupperware with your gloves.
Yes.
Right.
So I'll just, before I go into the car, I put on my gardening gloves because there's going to be like 8 blackberry bushes.
I'm the same. Like I impulsively, I'll be, weed, gotta get rid of it. Yeah.
We've gotten way off topic. I don't even know
Let's
what
take
we
a
were
break.
talking
When we
about.
get back, more
Okay.
emails. What do you say?
Yes.
All right, back from the break. So let's try to whiz through some emails here because I have a lot that I have been waiting to talk with you about. Anonymous patron says, what are ways in which one can prepare to be a parent for the first time? My partner and I are planning to have a baby next year, and we want to prepare well. I would love to be a good mom and make as little mistakes as possible. Rebecca, what are ways one can prepare to be a parent for the first time?
Do you have any good meditations on letting go of control? So there's a wonderful book by Anne Lamott called Operating Instructions. I would read that book. It's all about her first year of life with her son, and she's a single parent by choice. And just, she has a really, she tells us, there's this great story of like where she's trying to breastfeed and she's sitting on the hemorrhoid pillow from the hemorrhoids that she got from giving birth, and like there's poop everywhere, and like that's, if you can tolerate that, you're ready to be a parent. And then she has a book later on about her kid's drug addiction and how she couldn't save him, and that's a great book to read too. I mean, it is parenting. Well, first off, if you're in America, know that you are parenting in an extremely isolated culture, and anything that you can do to build community and have support, and know that you can't do it alone. And there's so many times where you'll feel so overwhelmed, and just to ask for support and try and build a network of either other parents or friends and family that can help you. It's so hard to parent in America because you're so isolated.
I'm pretty sure in 20, 50 years, they're going to look back at, or I hope that Americans look back at this time and think, what the fuck was wrong with our society? When you look around the world at the way in which kids are raised and their lifestyle, and you see how happy the kids are, and you also see the adults in those societies having way lower rates of eating disorders and depression and anxiety and violence and drug abuse and suicide. We think of ourselves as like the pinnacle of civilization, but we have completely brainwashed ourselves into 1,000 different notions that are just completely backwards. And you see other societies where the kids wake up when they want to, and they play with their siblings and their neighbors, and there's a dozen adults that love that kid that are within earshot and eyeshot, and the kid is enjoying themselves and free to do things and doesn't have a schedule and doesn't have the pressures put on them to get into an Ivy League school or to look a certain way. Social media hasn't infested the situation yet. Their diet is more conducive to their mental health. They're not being inundated with TikToks and advertisements. We look at ourselves and say, oh, we're civilized. And we look at these other societies and we're like, that kid has like dirty flip-flops on. What kind of mother would put dirty flip-flops on a kid? And it's just like fucking laughable, to judge these other society, these like shithole countries, as Trump would say, and to say that they're doing things wrong when you look at the data and they're obviously doing things right. There's so many problems.
I just saw some research that the healthiest, happiest kids out there are in families that regularly dance together. And I thought that was like, we had dance parties in our kitchen all the time. We dance. But like, that's what that's saying is relax, be joyous, be spontaneous, enjoy each other. Let something unexpected happen. If you can do that as a parent. I had this interesting, I don't know what's happening, but the grocery store is becoming more, for like a year or two, I never saw anyone at the grocery store. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing all of my kids' friends' parents at the grocery store. And mostly we wave and say hi. But there was this one mom that would like not smile back at me. And I just had all these memories of like how bitchy the parents are in Seattle and how territorial everyone is and how gross it can get and how unsupported I felt and I was like, oh, that was awful. So just know that depending on where you are, the parenting culture can be super toxic and judgy. Mm-hmm. And it's really important to find people who don't care if you're bottle feeding or breastfeeding or cloth diaper or chemical diapers or you're not diapering at all. Like, you know, things can get really niche in the U.S. about how you're doing things. And we feel like people have to do things exactly like we're doing.
Well, my theory on that isn't mind-blowing, but that parents have a natural urge to do right by their kids. Mm-hmm. And so they start looking around, which has to do with looking online, Facebook and whatnot. And the marketers are there to feed your head with a bunch of things that you can buy. The right crib, the right car seat, the right food, the right class, the right clothes, the right curriculum for preschool or something, you know. And, you know, case-by-case basis, sometimes these things might be helpful to think about. But what they're not saying is stop looking at fucking Facebook.
Right. Yeah, just enjoy your friends. But really, the number one thing I would say if you're stepping into being a parent is to do it in community. And what's really interesting is how corporatization changes that experience. So for decades, one of the main ways that American parents made friends early on is that you would attend a birth class and you would meet all these people that were going to have kids around the same time that you were, and potentially like you would stay in touch with those people. And Kaiser Permanente, which is one of the biggest insurance companies in America, just changed from attending a live class with other people to watching a video. I was like, damn, the destruction that they are doing to building community by doing that, which I'm sure will save them $1 gazillion million. Right. But it's just like, it's subtle changes like that when we take away human connection. And know that there's lots of places to find that connection. Like in Seattle, a lot of the community centers, this is pre-COVID, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they had open gym time, and like for $1, you could hang out 2 mornings a week in the gym and just watch other babies run around and climb on stuff and watch other people breastfeed, and like all you cannot parent alone.
Yeah.
Whatever crazy TikToker you're watching who says isolation is best, that's absolutely wrong.
Yeah. That's not a trend, is it?
Well, there's all of this.
I mean, there's messages that point towards isolation, like you got to be afraid of the pervert across the street that is definitely there.
Stranger danger.
Yeah. Like there's messages that will work to isolate people, but there's not a trend to isolate parents, is there?
Well, the trend that isolates parents is that you have to take your child to every activity possible, and you shouldn't just hang out in your neighborhood and meet your neighbors. The statistics show that all of the driving around that people do to take their child to the perfect activity is stressing the parent and the child. When it used to just be you just went to your neighbor's backyard and made mud pies.
Yeah.
And you didn't need to be learning.
Well, our parents didn't even know where the fuck we were. I mean, we were
raised on neglect and hose water.
Well, I mean, but I think of myself as a pretty happy person and a very happy kid. And everyone won. My parents didn't have to deal with that. Right. They didn't have to deal with us. And we got to rule the neighborhood. You know, I had 3 best friends that lived right next door to me. And we roamed from morning until sundown. It was like, you got to be home by dinner or sundown. That was the only rule. I'll wrap this up because we got other emails, but I'll just say that there are a few things that I would recommend as topics learning about. Attunement being one, attachment theory and attunement. It's not super complicated in terms of its...
Which just means enjoy, bring calmness and joy to your baby.
Yeah, that's part of it. But another part is noticing, and you have to know for yourself as a parent where you are. Everyone is different when they become a parent based on your own experiences, your own parenting that you went through, your own attachment style that you go through in terms of how attuned, how much you notice another person's emotional state.
And it depends what kind of kid you get.
Yeah, right. So attunement is noticing and reacting well enough. The second topic is emotional work. John Gottman actually he's known for his couple
baby
work.
home.
He's known for his couple research, but he is also he has a lot of really great research and trainings on how to help kids with emotions, about containing and mirroring and coaching and being with kids and their emotions. And it's strangely mind-blowing and novel, but shouldn't be. The notion of having good awareness and mirroring, just like I remember learning from, I don't know if it's John Gottman, but from these kind of folks that with kids, the first line of defense, if you will, or the first reaction you should have to a kid when they're having an annoying emotion is just to point out their emotion. You're angry. You're upset. You're sad. You're jealous.
Right.
You're cranky.
How to not escalate with your child is a whole art form unto itself.
Right. But also just like helping them understand the emotion that they're going through by naming it, the first step of mastery is having a word, right? And to know, oh, I am angry. That's not something that people come out of the womb knowing. We as parents have to educate kids. I think what you're experiencing is anger. I think what you're experiencing is sadness. I think you're in a bad mood. I think you're cranky. I think you're happy. I think you're joyous. I think you're, energetic. And over time, kids are like, oh, I am having these markers and these impulses and these urges, and I think this is called sadness. And then begins the ability to actually know what to do with that thing, sadness. But without that word and without that concept, then we're lost in the woods. The other thing is just to know your own emotional awareness and regulation, not only just to cope with parenting, but also to model for your kids, to be differentiated. Also work on your projective identification. Listen to my episodes on that. Another email about parenting, Rebecca, anonymous patron, she says, I'm a new mom, and your podcast has had a huge influence on my parenting. I am always thinking about how my 1-year-old baby is developing his understanding of himself through the way that I and other caregivers attune to him. My question is about daycare. Mm-hmm. Several days per week, he is with me. Some other days, he is with another attuned caregiver one-on-one. Once per week, he is in a busy daycare with a well-meaning caregiver who has several other kids to take care of. My baby cries as soon as the caregiver turns her attention away from him all day long. He has a little separation anxiety with me too, but not to the same extent. He finishes the day of daycare looking exhausted and stressed. So just to summarize this, the 1-year-old baby does well, obviously, with the mom, the patron, does well with a one-on-one caregiver, maybe a little bit of separation anxiety there, but then there's this huge leap of comfort from, mom, caregiver to daycare. Do you think all my efforts to give him a secure attachment style could be hindered due to this weekly experience that seems to be stressing him out so much? You're shaking your head, Rebecca.
No, I think it's fine that your baby's uncomfortable one day a week. So, first off, statistically, what we know is that infrequency is the hardest thing for a kid. So a once a week experience for us is not that big of a deal. For a kid, that can be stressful. I'd be curious if that kid was in that daycare setting more days a week, if they would get used to it more and they would be less stressed out. Some of it is the disposition of the kid. Some kids daycare just isn't a good fit for. But the other myth that we have in our culture is that any uncomfortable experience will be damaging. And that's actually not the case. Your kid will probably never remember that they were in daycare one day a week and that it was stressful. It's absolutely fine to have children have a variety of experiences.
Yeah, certainly the phobia that we have as parents that, oh no, my kid is going through something uncomfortable, that means I'm traumatizing them, is absolutely overblown. Having said that, when a child is going through distress, it is important to ask these questions that you're asking, patron, because there's a healthy level or range of distress that a kid will naturally go through, maybe even help them in some ways. And there's amount and intensity of distress that we should work to minimize. And there's a lot of research on daycare, and there's a lot of myths about daycare. I think a knee-jerk reaction from, I don't know, maybe people in our field is that it can't be healthy for a 1-year-old to be in a daycare setting with, 24 kids and 3 caregivers that are spreading out their attunement around the entire room.
Societies have looked like since the beginning of time.
Absolutely. But so I'll just put that out there that's way oversimplification and potentially just wrongheaded. But it is something to think about because age and attachment is something that we need to pay attention to. At 1 year of age, typically kids developmentally are solely attached to their main caregivers. And it's in all likelihood that your kid is attached not only to you, of course, but also to that one-on-one caregiver, considers that person actually to be another parent in a lot of ways. So you actually also want to think about how long that relationship is going to last, because it's the sort of the nanny phenomenon where, not Murray Bowen, but John Bowlby, who developed attachment theory. One of the reasons I think why he did is because he was an aristocrat in England, and his parents at the time had a different fucked up idea about parenting, which is that parenting was for servants to carry out, and proper English ladies don't get down on the ground, and they certainly don't breastfeed. That's for the lower classes, and so you would hire someone, and so they hired a nanny to take care of the kids. And John Bowlby was deeply attached to his nanny, and then one day she got another job or something, and she left. And he talks about this in his writing as like the most worst experience that he can imagine anyone having going through. And then he was sent to a boarding school as a young teen, which fucked him up in a whole other bunch of ways. Meanwhile, his parents are in the I don't know, the library of the house or whatever. What's a fancy word? The sitting room, is that a fancy? Is that?
Yes,
yeah,
that's a very fancy word.
Yeah. The sitting room and
the salon.
Yeah, the salon. I was going to say foyer,
So
but I'm guessing
fancy.
that
means
fancy
the
people don't hang
front.
out in the foyer.
They could. They're so fancy. They're in the foyer.
There is a consideration there in terms of age and in terms of attachment, and it's tough. It doesn't mean that a child is going to be forever unhappy. It's just something to pay attention to. The main thing, though, is that a child has a home base in you.
Right. Secure attachment.
Right. If they have occasional distress out of being separated from you by going to a daycare with a dozen kids, or say this other one-on-one caregiver eventually is not in your child's life and your kid goes through some loss there and grief, and he can come back to you and you're always there and you'll always be there and you always have been there, then that is a huge psychological health benefit.
Because I hear the same story for my clients who are in a divorce situation, and maybe the other caregiver isn't as consistent. Maybe they only get contact once a week. They'll report the same thing, that the kid comes back exhausted, depleted, but there's a period of reattachment and the kid stabilizes again. So all the time people say to me, like, I get so stressed out. And my question is, how long does it take to recover? And are you even able to recover? And most people's answer is like, oh yeah, I was able to stabilize doing XYZ. So the issue is not distress. Distress will always be present. It is, how are people able to reattune? With an infant, that might be a brutal night. They might not eat. They might get themselves so worked up that they can't go to sleep. They might be cranky the next day, but their nervous system is able to level out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good point. So what was I going to say? The other thing I was going to say is, having grown up in a daycare, I lived in a daycare for the most of my childhood, and passively observed my mom run this daycare. When you shove, I don't know how many kids was legal to have with two caregivers, but it was a lot of kids. And
I imagine everything was sticky.
My mom was pretty good about cleaning and about keeping things in order. It wasn't. It wasn't. Actually, I don't think I ever thought about that. You would think it would be a chaotic madhouse, but it really wasn't.
Your mom is a saint. I swear to God. Yeah. You were raised by a saint.
Yeah. I don't think I'd ever thought about that. It's funny.
That's my association with like a lot of kids in the 70s, is that
everything is sticky.
Every surface, you're getting peanut butter and graham crackers for snacks.
Yeah,
and then everything is sticky.
I mean, we had a dog, so maybe the dog would have eaten it up if it fell on the ground or something. I don't know, but I don't remember things getting dirty at all. But anyway, so the thing I'll bring up is that from a parent point of view, you see your kid come out of daycare and be exhausted and need time to adjust. Well, I would see, and my mom would see, the same thing when kids would come to daycare. The kid would come into daycare and go through a transition, particularly in the beginning, but as time went on, and they would be quite comfortable. And then we would see the parents come to pick them up, and we would see like an eruption of discomfort.
Right. They would head into
because
collapse.
Of the transition, or just emotions just pouring forward. Sometimes kids just have like, oh my God, parents, I don't know what I'm doing, And so it can look to a parent like maybe the kid is suffering for 10 hours.
And hours and hours.
But
right.
It might just be during the transition periods.
Yeah. I mean, you also see this when kids start kindergarten. So the majority is that the kids come home, they're sobbing, they fall asleep at the dinner table, they can't function after dinner, and they just crawl into bed. And it's because of the experience of kindergarten is so different than anything that they've experienced before. And this can go on for months. I mean, you also get kids in kindergarten that cry the entire day, and if you're in those settings, these things are normal and expected. If you're a parent watching from the outside, it's kind of shocking and awful. But it's totally normal.
Yeah. So I actually thought about this question about daycare because I've thought about it my whole career and maybe my whole life, but I also looked at a lot of the research and a lot of consensus, and here's 9 bullet points that I want to point out.
Break it on down.
One, and we've already covered some of these, is that individual personality traits of the child is something to take into account.
Some kids, like my aunt, told a story that she vomited every day on the way to kindergarten because that was just her temperament. It was too overwhelming.
Yeah. So some kids are more anxious, some kids are more mellow, some kids are more social, some kids are more isolating, some kids are more like fussy. And also those traits can drastically change from month to month or year to year. You can have a kid who is super fussy and then it's not. We tend to route all of these conversations into autism and ADHD, which are things to think about, but there are, there's a vast world of variables that children are facing that are completely outside of autism and ADHD. I just want to put that out. The number 2 bullet point is the quality of each caregiver. It's possible, you say that the daycare person is well-meaning, is the way you put it, but you're not there. And I don't want to make you paranoid, but there's a lot of possibilities that are happening, and I've heard a lot of horror stories. There was a news story recently. I won't go into details about it, but it was essentially that a bunch of parents thought that this one daycare owner was on the up and up, and the daycare owner was not on the up and up. And the kids were showing signs of being traumatized, and the parents just didn't know what was happening until the police raided it and da-da-da. Did you see that? I'll just give you the headlines. So the daycare was trying to make a lot more money by having like 2 or 3 times the amount of kids that they're supposed to have. And they would hide kids in a secret room in the basement behind a secret door in the hallway. And they didn't, obviously, the reason why the regulations are there is that you can't possibly take care of that many kids. And so a bunch of kids weren't having their diapers changed, and they were being isolated and malnourished and all that kind of stuff. And so somehow the police found out and did a raid, and there's like a badge cam of this, and it's quite distressing. But anyway, and there were reports from parents saying like, yeah, it was kind of weird because the daycare owner would tell us that we had to drop the kids off and pick the kids up at a very, very specific time, because then they would know which kids to put into the secret room and which kids to bring upstairs, so that they could make sure it looked like they weren't going over capacity. But anyway, so I don't want, daycare owners are generally great, and daycare owners probably have a couple flaws that parents have too. It's not the end of the world, but you just don't know. So the third thing is the fit between the caregiver and the child. It's possible, who knows, that your kid fits very well with you and this other one-on-one caregiver, but not well with the caregiver at the daycare. Who knows? Just something to think about. Number 4 is that you want to think about, this is sort of a catch-all, apparently, bullet point, which is your subconscious feelings about the busy daycare. I'm going to take a guess and say, anonymous patron, that on at least subconsciously, the busy anonymous daycare is not like your preference, you know what I mean? Because you're already limiting it, right?
It's only 1 day a week.
Right. It sounds like it's like the last resort, right? It sounds like if you could, it would either be you or this other nanny, but you might have subconscious feelings that are being noticed by your 1-year-old child as you are taking the kid to daycare and that kind of thing. And who knows, but that is definitely a thing. Kids will pick up on your anxiety. They evolved to do so because
they have to read you.
Yeah, if
to
you're
survive.
scared, if you're scared of a saber-toothed tiger or a snake or famine, then they need to be on alert. Absolutely. The other thing is the noise level of the daycare. It's possible that it's really noisy and your kid is not used to that and is purely reacting out of a discomfort of just noise level. Maybe they're just kind of sensitive to noises, or they're not used to it or something. Also, diet changes. What kind, usually you bring the food, but sometimes the daycare will have snacks, or the food will be given at a different time or something. And, for some kids, diet is, has a huge effect on their mood and their behavior. Not always, but just something to think about. Another thing is day of the week. Throughout the week, based on your schedule, there might be different sleep times. Maybe the baby stays up a little later on a Friday because you're up a little later on a Friday. And then Monday morning, boom, it's like 5 a.m. they're up. And, it's just something else to think about. The other thing is, are you giving it enough time? I don't know how much time the 1-year-old baby has been in the daycare. I don't know if you emailed me like 3 days into this, it could just be a matter of time. The other thing to think about is that the kid might already have acquired some mild traumas that are resulting in mild separation anxiety. It'd be hard to detect separation anxiety in a 1-year-old, to tell you the truth, because it's
right.
normal.
If you started this at 9 months, where kids are traditionally having a stranger danger experience anyways, like there are some developmental markers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's possible that the child needs more time to habituate to it, or I don't know. It depends on this, but it's unknown how but that could affect things. The kid could have some neurological reactivity to the environment that has to do with a spike in the stress from something that happened in their past. Who knows? My number 7, apparently, from when I made this, was just maybe it's just mild reactivity and it's nothing to worry about. Number 8 is, have you thought about a transitional object, like a pillow or a stuffy, or you could do what my mom did with my younger brother and give him your panties. Have I told you about this?
No.
So we called them Kevin's little brothers. My parents named Kevin. They thought it was a unique name, but then it came out that literally everyone who was born in the late 70s and early 80s was named Kevin. And he had his softies. So, my mom, when she would take care of
I just want to say I'm so far off the mic because I'm laughing so hard.
So, and I'll tell you about when they actually flew out of the van once when we were going down I-90, and we had to stop on the. But anyway, so my mom would take care of us kids, and she would wear her nightgown, which was very silky and satiny, and he became to associate this nightgown, the silky and softy, with comfort. And so when my mom was trying to help him to be more independent, I don't know how, I should ask her how she figured this out, but she figured out that if she gave him, and it wasn't just one pair of panties, and these are 70s panties.
Oh, yes. These are like over the belly button.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, I'm off the mic because I was laughing so hard. These are over the belly button, 100% polyester.
Yeah. These are
full ass coverage. I currently, full disclosure, search out underwear like this because I can't wear thongs, and it's not easy to find anymore.
I bet. So, and it's sort of a very nondescript beige color.
Oh, yes. I mean, colors in the 70s were so limited.
Yeah.
There might have been a light blue, a white, or a light pink, but there was definitely
very neutral colors.
There's no leopard print.
No.
You'd really have to search out leopard print panties.
And if you did, I'm guessing people would think that you were a lady of the night or something.
Yes, this is outrageous. Maybe red or black.
Yeah. And I think my mom had like I don't know what you call it, like a chamois. What do you call those like little shirts that women would wear?
Yeah, a camisole.
Camisole. And I think one of those was in there. It was several items. It was like 4 of these items. And my little brother would walk around with these. The way that Linus walked around with his blanket, my brother walked around with my mom's panties. And we were going down the freeway on I-90, which is interstate, and
goes from here to
Spokane. Here to Spokane. Well, yeah, it goes. Well, I think it goes all the way to New York or something, Chicago. But anyway, they flew out of the window, and we stopped the car on I-90, which is, a thing, stopping
it's
the
like
car.
a 5-lane freeway.
Yeah. And I think my older brother ran back a quarter of a mile and picked him out of the bushes on the side of the road or something.
Probably the blackberries.
Yeah, something. And anyway, so that's a transitional object. So maybe with your kid, that's all you need. The other thing that I have here, my last bullet point, is maybe try a different daycare if it doesn't really matter which daycare. It's possible that there's just something off about the daycare, the energy of the caregiver, the smells, the lighting.
Maybe it's sticky.
The stickiness, the noise level. Who knows what it is, but it could be just that particular daycare. I don't know. But yeah, so, it's good to think about, but overall, the thing that I always come back to is, does your kid feel safe around you?
Yeah, that's the most important.
And are you around enough of the time to be that safe person? Then they will be forced and they will want to move away from you, and they will experience glory and distress. But if they can come back to home base, as John Bowlby talked about, then in general, things will work out, and they will only need 5 years of therapy and not more.
Yeah, and they will still hate you from when they're 12 to when they're 15.
Yeah, maybe 12 and a half.
Yeah.
But
then,
definitely by 13.
But then by the time they're 20, they'll come over for movie night once a week. So
As your kid does.
yeah.
They're not 20.
Yes, they are. They're 21 in like 3 months.
Oh. Are you going to take them out on a 21 run?
No. We've got some fun plans. I tried to get, maybe I asked you about this. Seattle Symphony is doing a live accompaniment to the first Black Panther movie.
Ooh.
So that's their big birthday present.
You've been going to...
I love all that stuff.
Yeah.
They're also a traveling troupe. These tickets are so freaking expensive. It better be good.
How much?
Well, so The Last Airbender, you know that TV show?
Yeah.
This is not the Seattle Symphony. It's at the Moore. They're doing a live accompaniment to scenes from The Last Airbender. It won't be a full episode. And we're going to fucking sob our eyes out at that. We've watched it all the way through like 5 times. And we watched the live action version that was just done. That was really good. But not the movie, which was bad.
Right. The Shyamalan movie. Yeah.
How can you get that show wrong? I have a lot of feelings about that. How can Uncle not be funny?
Don't get me started on getting things wrong. The new Lord of the Rings TV show is just so not Tolkien. What else? The Star Wars
But
sequels.
you know what's good is have you ever watched the TV show that pretends to be a reality? It's like The Bachelorette, but it's a TV show.
No.
It ran for like 3 seasons. It started in 2015. I just started watching it last night.
What's it called?
Unreal.
Huh.
It's super. It's everything that we talked about, the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
Including the psychologist who just sits there with dossiers on everyone and tells the showrunners how to trigger the participants.
Oh.
It's everything we imagined was true.
Can you do one more email?
I sure can.
Let's take a break.
Let's take a break. Let me pee.
All right. I've had this email waiting in the wings for possibly years.
Really?
Because it's about compassion fatigue, and I know you know a lot about it. So, anonymous Canadian upper tier patron, she said, "This year has been extremely rough for my partner. He lost his dog. He has been in extremely profound and intense grief over the dog for months. His grandfather passed away earlier this year as well. I try very hard to be supportive and feel I do a pretty good job. Recently, a very close uncle of his has been diagnosed with cancer and put in palliative care. Again, I have been very supportive, but I am starting to feel myself having compassion fatigue. I am becoming slightly apathetic, finding myself worn down when he cries. My partner and I have an extremely open communication relationship, but I don't feel it's appropriate to communicate to him that I'm feeling compassion fatigue because it feels pretty abhorrent, honestly, to have the compassion fatigue. I feel a lot of guilt for feeling tired of constantly needing to be supportive. I don't know how to rectify this without telling my partner, but I also feel like it is a horrible idea to tell him. What do you think?
Well, I think he probably notices that you're getting cranky. So I would say it's okay to say, I need to spread this out a little bit. Who else can be your support system? You've had an unbelievable amount of traumas in a short amount of time. I need to make sure that my cup is fuller. So I'm not, I can't give to you from an empty cup.
I think in addition to that, the main idea that might convince and regulate this is to make sure that you and him understand that compassion fatigue is a real physical phenomenon on the brain. The brain is not an idea. It's a physical object that has chemistry and neurons. And when you overuse things in the same way that if you think too hard for 8 hours a day, then you can't think much beyond that. If you care too hard for a sustained amount of time, we understand through research that the brain starts to show effects like having irritability when someone is asking for support, or even just hearing about someone else's pain will make you irritable, or at the very least, you won't feel anything. You won't feel compassionate. You'll feel apathetic. And so if he understands this, then because what I'm thinking is happening for you, anonymous upper tier patron from Canada, is that you are worried that he is going to feel like you don't care. But that is not the case. Therapists enter therapy as a profession because they deeply, deeply care. And it's well understood that therapists who work with a certain type of client over time will absolutely develop apathy towards not only their clients, but everyone in their life. It translates to when they go home. They don't care about their kids. They don't care. I mean, it's not like they don't care, but they don't care about
They're too
the pain.
exhausted.
They don't
Right.
care about other people's pain. They don't have empathy. They can't extend themselves anymore because they're worn out. And the problem with chronic compassion fatigue is when you do manage to get a little bit of compassion back, it quickly gets used up. So you're always operating on like fumes in your gas tank, and the only way to get back half of your gas tank is to completely go cold turkey. Vacations, taking, like I can't listen to anyone's problems for the next week.
There have been times in my life where I've been very open on Facebook, like, hey, the following 4 crises are happening. And someone that I know follows and reads what I have to say will then like write me with their problem and say, hey, can you help me with this? And it has caused a lot of strife in my life that I write back and I say, I can't. I literally don't have anything else to give right now.
Right. And if people understand compassion fatigue, which people don't usually, then I think they'll understand. But if they don't understand, then it will feel like a finger in the face, finger in the face, an FU. One more email.
Okay.
Upper tier patron Ann from San Francisco says, what are some psychological traumas that are associated with immigrant families of war-torn countries, and how does this perpetuate systemic oppression of minority groups? I am first-generation Vietnamese American. Yeah. My parents each suffered a long and violent journey to immigrate to America. They were one of the boat people fleeing the war. As time goes on, and I come to understand more of the world and myself, I've been more compassionate towards my parents and their struggles, while also honoring the pain and suffering I endured as a child at their hands. While I am still struggling to come to terms with the abuse I suffered, I also want to recognize that my parents are, maybe unknowingly, suffering from their own traumas.
Yeah, serious PTSD.
Right. I'd like to hear your take on how war and immigration can impact minority groups psychologically and how these traumas perpetuate the further oppression of these people.
So my first year out of graduate school, my job was in the South Bronx, and many, many people there had come from the Caribbean and Dominican Republic, Haiti, severely repressive, and Puerto Rico, which is seriously an occupied territory. So I saw it there. I mean, you get all kinds of, either military or police brutality trauma. You get malnutrition trauma. You get knowing that you have to leave your country. Like I had one client, as the politics in the U.S. get so intense, a lot of my clients are like, do I stay or do I go? And many of my clients are children of immigrants. So they'll say, how did your family know to leave the country that they were in? And one of my clients said, well, they were eating dirt and grass. That was all they had access to. So it was like, okay, that level of malnutrition severely impacts people in a way that we don't talk about or think about kind of in our modern American culture, although there's hunger here too, of course. Then you get so then I went from that job to working at Asian Counseling and Referral Service, where I worked with clients that had served on every aspect of the Vietnam War, North Korea, South Korea, and then the Golden Triangle, people who were from Laos and Thailand. Many of them were in small tribes that the CIA had recruited to work with them. And then when you
said North Korea, South Korea, you mean North Vietnam,
North
South
Vietnam, South Vietnam. Sorry. The boats were extremely traumatic. I mean, people were literally left to drink their urine. That was all that they had access to. The refugee camps themselves were traumatic. Whether or not they would be able to immigrate was traumatic. Coming to America and trying to acculturate and then getting swamped and engulfed in racism, also classism and our hatred/need for immigrants in this country, so that many of their parents were working 2 or 3 jobs to survive, and the children are raising themselves.
Yeah, and I'll point out another layer of this, which is racism within East Asian groups. When the wave of Vietnamese people came over, the majority of Asian Americans were at the West Coast, or at least a good portion of them were Japanese and Chinese. And they looked down on Vietnamese people and Cambodian people and Filipinos. So even the section of town, whether it's Chinatown or Japantown or the International District or something, or those communities.
There's a separate Vietnam town. Like it's up it's
well,
not
little Saigon, they call it, right?
Yeah.
So the oppression is within the house, if you will.
Well, and then the children of immigrants are often translating for those family members. The therapy is non-existent or completely stigmatized in their culture of origin, so those people don't end up in therapy. The kids are code switching all of the time between school and home. So yeah, there's endless layers of trauma in the story.
Yeah, and that's of course after the trauma of war, watching people die right in front of you, maybe even having to kill people yourself to survive.
Rape,
or
torture, imprisonment.
And the threat of that obviously happening all the time.
Starvation.
Yeah, it's horrible. We see it in movies, right? Like a James Bond movie or something. But ground level, a tiny dose of that can really be rough and can drastically change your psychology and your personality forever. The nervous system can only handle so much.
Sounds, smells, an accent, a type of clothing. I mean, I've seen people flood for all kinds of reasons. And being a white therapist in that environment, people would be very clear with me about what it meant for me, what it meant for them to have a white person in a safe environment for them, and how could I possibly be safe and understand their experience. And, it would take a very long time to prove to them that I was safe and caring. And I would mess up all the time. I would, I didn't know all the cultural cues, especially around food. So yeah, You didn't
realize that bringing your gun to session was not a good idea?
Well, here I am, like classic white Seattle therapist that has 4,000 food allergies, and a client brings in food to share it with me. If I reject that food, I'm rejecting that client and their very, very essence of who they are.
What'd they bring?
Oh my God, everything. Home cooked everything. Sticky rice, pork, this thingamajigger, this thing. And I could go on to all the food experiences at that job at length. And yeah, so as the child of immigrants from a war-torn country, you step away from your family sometimes in order to heal, to go to therapy, to develop a language that they might never have access or want to understand.
Yeah, and to, briefly talk about a nuance to your question, Anne from San Francisco, about how these traumas work to further oppress these people. There's a lot of intelligent philosophical commentators who have written about this, but just off the top of my head, one is that when you have colonial powers that caused this problem to begin with, and then you have those people fleeing that country because of the mess that the colonial powers made, and then they flee to anywhere that will take them or a safe place, and they come to one of those colonial powers, being the United States, and then the United States not only just is racist because you're not white, but also you're Vietnamese, so you're part of the problem, or you're a reminder of this black mark on American imperialism and military, and you're a foreigner and you don't speak English and your food smells funny, and you're the problem and you're invisible and you're irrelevant and you're not smart, or you're one of those like dirty Chinese that are just like these worker bees that are, the model minority at best, and at worst you're like a sweatshop automaton or something, or you're a sex worker by default. Obviously, if you're a Vietnamese woman walking around, it's like, oh well, obviously, you jack off guys for money or something, and it's all just part of the system, and you just have ignorance, but also a choice that the patriarchy and the power structure makes to uphold their power and to make themselves feel better. And it is continuing until today. I think that at some point, America is going to wrestle with the way that they treat Asian Americans, similar, I think, to the way in which America has struggled and had convulsions regarding the way it treats black people. There have been previous convulsions around the way it treats Asian Americans, but not nearly as much as it needs to. And I suspect that something will happen in the next 10 years that will turn attention to it. And
well, even there's been so many articles recently about how Asian American men are allowed lead roles now that have complexity to them. Like there's a serious shift happening in perception around Asian masculinity being sexy, Asian men being capable, being complex characters.
Yeah. Once I saw The Matrix 20 years ago, I can't unsee it, and the erasure of Asian Americans, the ignoring of when Americans talk about diversity, they're not talking about Asian Americans. They're not talking about us, and it fucking sucks. It doesn't feel good to just be ignored and denied. And I'll have people who will say, "Well, Asians are basically white." What? So why did they lock up my family members in the 40s? Why did they take my great-grandparents who were in their 60s and put them behind bars in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming with plywood walls? So they're white. You're telling me that Americans think, it was a while ago, but yeah. So it's not a fun experience, but I have a lot of privileged identities, but if you are first generation Vietnamese American, like it's way worse. If you have an accent, if you look more Asian,
right? If your parents can't negotiate spaces, if you are the adult in the room, the parentification that happens when your parents can't speak English is huge.
Yeah.
And what your family does or does not get because you can't negotiate as a child for what needs to happen. Or even sadder, if you can negotiate.
Yeah. And I would treat a lot of teens who are in gangs, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Hmong kids Lao kids who were in gangs. But as the stereotype goes, the one difference, so I treated a lot of Hispanic gang members and black gang members and white gang members and Asian gang members. Pretty much across the board, and also black immigrant, like African or
Somali,
these kinds of
Eritrean,
right, which was a wholly different thing. Like
the amount of trauma there is insane,
right? And the amount of ostracization, because they would also be discriminated against from other black kids, and so they really had nothing to lose. These Somali and Ethiopian kids, they just had nothing to lose, and it was pretty hard to reach them. But I'll laugh at myself and about Asians in that the Asian gang members that I treated still got straight A's.
Culture dies hard.
Yeah. Maybe not all of them and maybe not all straight A's, but,
right. Yeah.
But the first thing that went with a black gang member or a white gang member or a Hispanic gang member was grades. That was the first thing that went. And then it was skipping school, and then it was running away from home, or, not coming home at night. And then it was crime. And then, but you would have these really hardened criminal Asian gang member guys who were violent and would steal and would not go to school and maybe hit their parents, but they were still getting passing grades in school. And as you say, culture dies hard. So I was like, wow, we're really just leaning into that stereotype, are we not?
It's like when a Jewish person isn't funny, and I'm so confused. I'm like, how did 10,000 years of the tribe skip you? How did that happen? How did you miss one of our key functions?
Well, that's the stereotype, right?
We're the best dancers. I mean, that's the thing. We're the best entertainers.
Yeah.
Challenge me. Although I just saw this video of, oh my God, it's Steve Martin and the famous tap dancer of the time, who's African-American, whose name is totally escaping me.
Oh.
But it's Steve Martin tap dancing, and like...
The guy from White Knights?
Yes. Hayes, this is for last name. Anyways, it's him tap dancing for like 5 minutes. And, he's on Only Murders in the Building, so I'm watching him all the time do the best physical comedy of all time. We see him on his banjo all the time, but I had forgot that he could tap dance like
I don't think I know that. When Stacy and I were on a road trip, I wanted to get a book on tape that we could listen to, and I bought his memoir that he published 15 years ago or something, and it is amazing.
I should listen to it. He's my hero.
His life is so interesting.
He's an art collector. I mean, he's a really interesting guy.
Yeah, but he just one detail is he was abused verbally by his dad and would stay away from home, and his mom was kind of standoffish. He lived within bike distance of Disneyland and started working at Disneyland when he was like 10 years old, and he basically lived at Disneyland. And then he tells the whole story about how he saw this one performer do magic or something, and he was like transfixed. And then before getting into comedy, he got into magic, and he just would always strive, and eventually, like, he was one of those Mickey Mouse kind of workers in the magic shop, and he was allowed to do like these little magic shows that he would just do on the side to kind of drum up business and to be a part of the Disneyland experience. And then he would learn how to say jokes and how to work a crowd.
Well, he learned how to play the banjo because he would get nervous between jokes and he needed something to do.
Well, I can't remember. He goes into detail about the banjo too, and I forget. I think that was a part of it, but it's this real. Before he became who he was eventually, there's this really interesting progression. He worked at Knott's Berry Farm eventually as part of this nightly performing group on a stage, and it's the way he's a brilliant man, so it's really funny, and he does the book on tape himself, but. I couldn't believe how interesting his life. They need to make a movie
about him.
They need to make a TV show miniseries about, and it needs to end when
Saturday Night Live.
Well, there's a point when he becomes kind of really big. Like he goes on the Tonight Show.
Oh, okay.
Maybe like end when he goes on the Tonight Show.
Yeah. Well, so you talked about actually watching All of Me and like. Loving it.
So that's all a part of it. Because you mentioned All of Me last time with Lily Tomlin and Steve Martin. And I remember loving that movie as a kid. And so I watched it because you had primed that pump. And this is all part of my like childhood Steve Martin revisiting.
I mean, there were so few comedians. I mean, his comedy was nasty too. I remember my parents bought me that album for my birthday that had the King Tut song on it, and it was not appropriate for children. But he's what they call a triple threat. I mean, he can just do it all, and then it's amazing to see him. I don't know how old he is now, but to see him in Only Murders, like just be, physical comedy is super hard.
Yeah.
And he's still the absolute best at it. Like, there's this scene in the first season that's in the last episode where he's gotten double-crossed by the killer. And I could just watch that over and over again and just laugh and laugh and laugh.
Yeah.
Like, he's amazing.
Yeah, and he's humble too in the book. Like he'll review his big hits, the stand-up that he did and the jokes, and he'll retell some of the jokes, and he'll say, people thought that joke was really funny, and looking back, I don't know if it holds up, and I don't even know why it was funny, but people laughed a lot. And because I worry that younger generations will approach his material or see a stand-up of his and think, why is that funny?
Yeah, I think to know at the time he was so revolutionary and so fearless.
He talks about that, about how he learned how to make a joke about jokes. He was doing a routine about a routine, which of course a lot of people have done since then.
Right, but comedy before him was like the Henny Youngman, like Take My Wife Please. Right. And then here was this guy that was making a fool of himself.
Yeah.
I mean, he wore the arrow through his head. I mean, there was this way in which he was able to say, like, laugh directly at me.
Right.
Laugh at me. All
right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself. Why should they take care of themselves?
Wait, if anyone makes it, I don't know when this episode will air. But
soon, maybe like before Halloween.
Oh, before Halloween. Okay, so people are so stressed out in America because of the election for really good reasons. So I am working with a lot of my clients about that stress and where small ways that they can find joy. Take that technology Sabbath, turn that phone off, walk away from the chatter, walk away from arguments that you might be having with your relatives right now or close friends.
And put your phone down.
Put your fucking phone down. Turn it off even.
Yeah. But after listening to this episode.
But also, try and find joy in each other. I always think about in 2017, I took this amazing trip where I was in Spain and Croatia and Turkey. And I didn't understand till I was done that I was taking like a dictatorship road trip from like old dictatorships to Turkey was a current. Erdogan was in power when I was there. And the way people survive is that they gather and they eat together and they dance and they play music and they laugh. And so take care of yourself doing those things. Mm-hmm. Because we need you in good health and your friends and your family need you.